It's a name we've all said over and over, but have you ever stopped to wonder what the word Nevada really means? Well, it's Spanish for snow-capped, and Las Vegas is Spanish for the meadows. But that's not the only Latino connection to our state. As we celebrate Clark County Centennial, we'll take a look back at our Hispanic influence. We start with the very first Hispanics to settle in our county, coming here not to enjoy our valley's scenic vistas, but as a refuge as they fled the turmoil of the war that raged at home.
The Mexican Revolution started in Mexico before 1910, but it was reaching a peak where the common people were suffering a lot. You had the government faction and you had the rebel faction, neither one of which was well funded. And so whenever soldiers from either side went into a village, the people lost livestock, women. The common people suffered a lot. In my own family's experience, my grandmother lost a husband. She lost livestock because soldiers, it didn't matter if they were the government soldiers or the rebels. It was just a dangerous environment. And so to get out of that environment, they migrated into Texas, El Paso. The railway was something that was convenient to take them right into El Paso. And then from El Paso, they were able to travel into other parts of the Southwest. You have to remember the railway system was established in the 1880s in the Southwest, and so that facilitated the migration and facilitated them coming to Nevada as well as California.
It's that major event that pushes so many people out. It's estimated that maybe 1 million Mexicans will leave Mexico and be dispersed throughout the Southwest. And this is when the first major Mexican settlement comes to Clark County. Traditionally, it's the railroad, because the American railroads and the Mexican railroad systems meet up, especially along the border.
Lifelong resident Honorable Judge John Mendoza remembers his grandfather's harrowing journey.
It was at the end of the Mexican Revolution of 1910, and my grandfather had fought with Pancho Villa, General Pancho Villa. There was a battle that was fought somewhere down around central Mexico, in which Villa suffered a loss. So he started his retreat, and he got his troops on a train, Mexican train, railroad train, to the border. He eventually came up to Las Vegas and then worked as a track hand.
The judge's grandfather would find work on the railroad like other Mexican immigrants that came before the revolution.
Most of the Southwest from Mexico into the United States had been built, those railways had been built by Mexican workers. So they already had a pool of experienced railroad workers from Mexico. So it was a natural thing to follow that they would have this type of labor available to them. Once that railroad was done, they continued to work here as railroad workers. When mining started to take off, prior to 1905 even, they were involved in building the rail spurs to the mines, and so it was a natural following that they would get involved in the mining industry. But they were certainly here at the founding of Clarkstown site in 1905. They provided the backbone of the community. They were solid individuals just like other families. There's evidence that there was a Spanish-speaking business selling drinks and food to the population, what little there was of it at the time.
In 1910, Clark County's population was a little over 3,000, with the Hispanic population at just a handful. For the most part, they were so few that their presence went largely unnoticed.
In those beginning years, there really wasn't a huge population to cause any kind of conflicts or confrontations. Most of the men who came were interested in working. You know, they weren't interested in establishing if they were receiving equal rights. They wanted to work. And the population was sufficiently small as to not be a threat to compete with valued resources. The railroad worker tended to be of Mexican background, and then the foremen and the supervisors were Euro-American, but there wasn't that perception that there was any real bigotry involved here. It was pretty much an egalitarian society in early Las Vegas. real prejudicial behavior didn't really manifest for Mexicans, Asians, or African Americans until actually after World War II.
The Mexican community may have been small in numbers, but the ties with each other were strong.
You find that out because on Cinco de Mayo, all of those were celebrated here by the Mexican community.
And they would have little dances in their homes. They would move the furniture out, and these were these little 4 or 5 room homes. And they would cook the food and have the eating outside, and they would dance inside.
That's the way that was our getting together of the community. Grandmother and grandpa would have dances at the house and dinners. And, dinners, people seated outside around the house. And in the evening, and somebody would always have a guitar or some musical instrument to play. And they'd get out there and they'd dance. We'd dance in the street.
They were a very tight community. Some of the people who were well off than others would underwrite some activities. There was a madam. She ran a brothel, and she was known as the mother of the community because she was somewhat affluent from her industry. She underwrote a lot of the Cinco de Mayo or Mexican Independence Day activities, and would help anyone who really needed it. Sheriff Sam Gay was paid to look the other way. And it was considered a quiet industry.
Not so quiet was a little operation Grandma Mendoza ran during Prohibition.
His grandmother was also a bootlegger. They had an indoor swimming pool, so to speak, and that's where they would cool the beer, and then
that's where I would swim.
Yeah, and then when they would get word that the revenuers were coming, and so she would tell him plus all his aunts who were just a little older than him to jump into this pool, and there were all these bottles there, and they fill it full of bubbles, and so they wouldn't be able to see the bottles of beer.
There was more diversification in what they did by the time the 30s hit. You had families, though, that were innovative enough that they would create their own business. They would have cafes. They had laundry businesses where they would actually do laundry for the hotel industry as well as private individuals. They had cottage industries.
No matter how creative and industrial the Hispanic community was, almost nothing was able to escape the black hole of the Great Depression.
The Great Depression cuts that off, and Mexicans are now surplus labor, unwanted labor, and they will be repatriated. Many of them will be repatriated back to Mexico.
The Great Depression was such a hardship on the Mexican people that from 1933 to 1939, almost 1 million left the United States and went back to their homeland. But as the country recovered from the Depression, so did the Hispanic population.
When I came to Nevada, there was 85,000 people in the entire state. I don't think it was 150 Hispanics. And but then when they found out that we were winding up with the jobs at the hotels, then we call our relatives, we call our friends, and we call our neighbors from back home that here's a place that you can you can really go move forward.
After serving at Nellis Air Force Base in the early 50s, Eddie Escobedo would fill one of those positions.
When I first came, the Filipinos used to be the one that worked at most of the showrooms on the strip. And when I came in, the maitre d' at the desert in Pancho, he hired me as a busboy, and they got stuck with Liberace show, and they didn't have enough busboys, so they got me in. And I didn't know that you only take care of your station and let the other guys work their station. I did his station, this other guy's station, and the other station, and I just wanted to work because I was doing the job with 2 or 3 guys. So I said yes, and then making the kind of money that I was surprised that the first night I got like $56. That's what I used to make a week, and then I made it in one day.
But work wasn't his whole life. Escobedo would find a social outlet in church.
Not because I'm a religious person, but because there was a place to meet girls. And then I left a note one day that you know, that it was going to be a party at such and such place. You know, you're welcome and blah, blah, blah. And people responded. And then I made 15 or 20 copies for another party that I found out it was going to take place at Hispanic homes, of course. And boom, same way, all the paper, they disappear. So that's when the idea of coming out with a newspaper came out. Because going to church, I found out who was pregnant, who was going to get married, who was getting a divorce, who was throwing a party, who was having a graduation. And I put it in handwritten paper, and people, you know, they took all that information. Then they start calling me. I mean, that's when I decided, you know, the day that I have enough money, I want to get a newspaper.
That dream would come true after working for Rolando Lorez on his paper. Escobedo became the nightlife reporter there. But that paper would close, and Escobedo would start his own paper, El Mundo, which would become the county's longest-running and most popular Spanish-speaking newspaper. But it wasn't always that way. After 1 year in operation, Escobedo ran into financial difficulty and turned to Las Vegas Sun owner Hank Greenspun for help.
They say, Eddie, I think Hispanics is going to have a place here in town, and I foresee that. So therefore, as you know, we have a Hispanic column in Las Vegas Sun. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to insert your paper in my Las Vegas Sun, and he says, and we see how it goes. At the end of 9 months, I went to him and I told him, Mr. Greenspun, I think El Mundo can walk on its own. Are you sure? I said, yes, sir. And thanks to Hank Greenspun, El Mundo is alive. All of my 4 kids have gone from cleaning the offices, helping in the production, and delivering papers. And of course, now we got 3 trucks. We also use 3 companies to distribute different communities and different local clubs and organizations. They have called El Mundo the voice of the Hispanics in Nevada, because through our paper we were able to reach the politicians, the Harry Reid's, the Jan Sensin, the Shirley Berkeley's, Dina Titus, the Oscar Goodmans, the politicians nowadays. They do, I won't say they pay attention to us, but they listen to us.
Barack Obama listened when he met with Escobedo to ask for his endorsement in the presidential campaign.
So I took him that polo shirt and a golf cap, and I presented to him with El Jefe, which means such a chief. And he said, that's very nice. He says, let's have a picture because this is going to be in the history books.
But that wasn't Escobedo's first brush with the president.
I have been at the White House 14 times. First time that I went, I cry. And every time I go there, it is something new that I learn. And it throws some kind of electric shock into your body. You walk in and you go into the blue room, the red room, and you go to the Oval Office and you see there in that desk, the most powerful man in the world is there, only in America. Only in America. Because I don't know if anywhere else in the world I would have done what I have been able to accomplish in my 57 years here in Las Vegas.
Before Eddie, there was Rolando Lorez, the man who started the very first Hispanic magazine, radio show, TV show, and newspaper.
Since I came to this country, I started making myself in my mind, in my head, to blend with the customs and the ideas and the language of this country. And aside from anybody else, I listened to the radio. I didn't understand what they were saying, but I was listening. You know, I knew a little bit of English because in private school in my country, the afternoon section was all in English. And if you speak Spanish, you had to pay a fine.
His country was Cuba, and like many Cubans, Rolando Lorez fled to the United States after Fidel Castro came into power. It didn't take long for Rolando to immerse himself in the community and start a Spanish-speaking magazine.
We used to take it to entertainers in the strip, you know, like the Castro sisters and the King sisters used to have a Spanish bongo player, and we used to bring the magazine to them, mainly direct, hand to hand.
Rolando would reach even more of the community with his radio show.
It was probably the only way that the Spanish people can feel connected to each other, and that's how the whole thing started.
Rolando then made the jump from radio waves to the small screen.
I talked to everybody in the Spanish community. Let's put a Spanish show together. Let's put a Spanish television hour together. And everybody told me I was crazy. Oh, you crazy, Spanish television, you crazy. Everybody thought it was a stupid idea. So one day I get up and I drove to Channel 5.
Turns out the idea wasn't so crazy.
And I had people coming over and dancing the TV show, kids come over and, we did a special Mother's Day show where we elected the Mother of the Year. It was more like a social event.
The hard-hitting stuff would be left at the newspaper, Rolando's fourth venture in Hispanic media. That paper would eventually close and he would start an English-speaking paper. And throughout all his ventures, Rolando remains a fearless journalist.
That's why I don't live in Cuba. Because I feel that I have the right to say what I want. It doesn't mean that I'm right.
In 1960, over 120,000 people called Clark County home, and just under 600 of those were Hispanic. The Immigration Act of 1964 opens up immigration to Latin America and Asia, and most Mexican Americans in Las Vegas can trace their families coming at that point. And at this time, we can also trace the beginning of many important Hispanic organizations.
The Cuban Circle was a Cuban club, a Cuban American club. That's how the Cubans, we got involved, and all the Cubans got involved. People came here and used to go to the Cuban club to be able to get referrals or be able to go ahead and make contacts to be able to get jobs. And out of that group, we had and then Michael Callahan was actually the governor at that time. And talking to Arturo Cambeiro, he said, Otto, we should organize a Chamber of Commerce. Why? Because I think we need to have political, social, and economic power.
The Latin Chamber of Commerce was born. Starting with just 90 members, today there are over 1,600. And as their numbers grew, so did their causes, supporting both young and old with the Latino Youth Leadership Conference and the Art Cambiero Senior Center.
And we have around 100 seniors that come here and are being fed by us. The seniors don't have any family or don't have any support. It's a way for them to talk to each other and so forth and have a nutritional meal every day. We continue to feel that the Chamber have been a vehicle by which we have moved the leadership of the Hispanic community forward. I think we wanted to be perceived as a positive type of factor in this community, and we intend to continue doing this.
Other organizations took hold throughout the 60s and 70s, like the Nevada Association of Latin Americans and the Nevada Spanish-Speaking Coalition. And even though the number of Hispanics were growing in Clark County, it was still a small community.
Growing up in a town with minimal Hispanics, it was interesting because I look back now and I grew up in an area where there were very few Hispanics at my elementary school or even at my junior high and high school. And I always say that you could count the number of Hispanics on one hand. Those of us that attended Chaparral High School, and the majority of us were related.
Nancy Alamo's father, Tony, a Cuban immigrant, moved his family to Las Vegas in 1974. From the humblest of beginnings, he worked his way up to become a casino executive. Nancy has made big strides herself in the school district with the program she is most proud, the Hispanic Baccalaureate.
And it's a program that started back in 1987 with 27 graduates from one high school. And it was meant to honor the students in reaching the goal of completing high school. The Hispanic dropout rate is on the rise nationwide and is an issue, and anything we can do to give incentive and hope to our students, we do.
10 years after the Alamos landed in Las Vegas, another family would set down roots here and would play a vital role in the development of the Las Vegas Strip.
And we came here to design, believe it or not, I'm dating myself, the Golden Nugget. So that's what brought us into this town. And we stay, and we love it.
For Sandy Pelton and her late husband, the Golden Nugget was just the beginning for their engineering firm.
Before my husband passed away, we did all of Steve Wynn's project, which was the Golden Nugget, the Mirage, the Treasure Island, the Wynn, all of those until he got sick and we couldn't finish the encore. We did the original Venetian. Actually, we did almost everything except for the Mandalay Bay group, but everything else, and the Stratosphere, we did everything else. Oh, we did all of the elementary and high schools. We were very busy, you know, very, very busy.
As a former TV star in Puerto Rico, Sandy wasn't shy about making friends in her new home.
And I decided, you know, let me reach out to the community. So I literally went on the phone book, right at the phone book, and anybody I would call, I would tell them, I'm from Puerto Rico, and pretty soon I would meet another Puerto Rican, and Mexican. The Mexican community has always been very, very together. They opened their arms to me, and I was very, very thrilled. So it took me like 2 months before I could get involved with people and the doors open. You know.
As the Peltons were building the city, Sandy was also helping to build a community.
The one that we founded, which is the Señoras of Excellence, Señores of Distinction. That one, when we do this event, the Colombia Association helps me, the Puerto Rican Association helps me, and we benefit the Latin Chamber of Commerce Community Foundation Scholarship Fund. You have all of these organizations coming to this event with the sole purpose of educating the youth of Las Vegas. And the scholarships are not just for Latino kids, it's for those children who need them, regardless of race and nationality. And we are trying to make a difference, and it's starting to show.
In the 1990s, we see an explosion in the Hispanic population. The overwhelming amount of Hispanics eager to fill construction and service jobs in the Strip helped make Nevada the fastest growing state in 1990. And in response, the county added more cultural events to meet the needs of the ever-growing Hispanic community.
I think that we do a lot of programs here for the Hispanic community. I mean, Mexico Vivo was the group to perform Hispanic performances, Mexican in particular, Mexican dance. Right now, we have 15 groups, and each one represents different areas of Mexico now. Also, other groups like Puerto Rico, Nicaragua, Colombia, other groups that are now performing and doing dances and preserving their culture.
One of the biggest events is the Day of the Dead, or All Souls Day, celebrated November 1st and 2nd. The holiday, started in Mexico centuries ago, honors those that have passed on with elaborate altars, poetry, music, and dancing.
I think this cultural center really represents what we do.
As we head into 2010, our county's population is hovering right around 2 million, with Hispanics making up nearly 30%. Local leaders agree, though, that there are still struggles to be overcome, like the lack of Hispanic politicians in the community.
John was the first Latino ever elected to any statewide office in the whole state of Nevada. We need to elect more Latinos to elected office because that's not, I mean, we've been able to elect a few, but certainly not in comparison to the percentage of the population.
The power couple has been fighting for decades here in the Valley for equality in all areas of Hispanic life.
We started then working and fighting. Sometimes we had to push harder to get them to hire more Latino teachers. And it's a good thing that we did, because by the 90s, the Latino population just exploded. And we started seeing many more, or a more fair representation of Latinos in the Clark County School District workforce than there had been before.
We are not going to sit at home and wait for somebody to bring us prosperity. We have to work ourselves for what we have. And at the same time, be part of this community. I just don't see two communities, the Latin American community or the Hispanic community, and we are all in this together. We are Las Vegas, whether you speak Spanish, whether you speak with an accent or not. We're still in all of this together. So, to me, I think we have made a mark here, and we will continue, and for the next 100 years.
As we look towards the future, we also must remember our past.
The next generation could and should be able to look back at their predecessors and admire what they've done. These are the miners and the railroad workers and the entrepreneurs that contributed to the community in a solid way. Their tenacity, their endurance, and their humility are attributes that are to be admired. They have contributed in a way that no other group has contributed.
If you want to share your memories about living in Clark County, we'd love to hear from you. Just log on to our website at accessclarkcounty.com/100. And don't forget to join us next time as we leap back and look forward at 100 years of Clark County history.